Hello there, this is all to do with the croquembouche today, and what I'm going to show you is pretty much 7 stages of making a croquembouche. Croquembouche is generally used at French weddings, and it's a highly prized piece of pastry. It's generally filled with a crème pâtissier, but the crème pâtissier can be flavoured in all sorts. It can be flavoured with chocolate, orange, liqueurs, anything you like really, and it's generally dipped and finished off with caramel. But today what I'm going to do is actually dip it in chocolate, simply because we English love chocolate, and the simple fact is it's a damn sight easier to make than the caramelised one. But in a future edition I'll probably do the caramelised one as well, so you can see that. But today we're going to do croquembouche. It's going to have 7 stages. It's going to be decorated with proper chocolate, not the baker's chocolate, not the stuff that you really dislike, but it's the real nice, sharp, shiny, crunchy chocolate. It's going to be filled with an orange and chocolate crème pâtissier, and it's going to be decorated with chocolate roses, but modelling roses, and all the way down. And at the end of that, hopefully we'll have a chocolate croquembouche. Right, stage 3, profiteroles. The biggest problem with profiteroles is trying to keep them to the actual size, because you're going to mould them, or you want them to stack up in a tower. If you don't get them right, if there are hugely blown profiteroles, then simply they don't look good. So you've got to keep them round, nice and tight, nice and round. So that will come in a minute or two a bit later. First of all, get a big enough pan that you can actually work with, and pop your butter into it, pop your milk into it, sorry, your water into it, and then pinch of salt. The salt helps for the flavour, but it also helps to harden the protein off in the flour and actually bind it and harden it so it doesn't collapse. Take your flour. I've got 2 sorts of flour, a mixture of soft flour and a mixture of bread flour here. And just sieve it again, making sure you've got all the lumps out of it and any foreign bodies that might be in it, and there are those occasionally in it. Bring that to a rolling boil. That needs to be a rolling boil. Crack your eggs off, just whisk those together. Use a fork for that. It's not hugely important. All I'm doing it for is so that when I pour these eggs into the roux that I'm making now, they'll go in as a stream rather than plonking in as a single egg. So just whisk those up. You don't have to warm them up, they come straight from the fridge, but just get them whisked up. If you really don't like the chowder, the little bit that holds the air sac from the actual shell, the shock absorber, if you don't like the chowder, then simply put it through a sieve. That's what you do really. Okay, waiting for that to come to the boil. This might be a bit messy, so once that boils, I'm going to add the flour to it. Just remove it from the heat when I add the flour, stir all the flour in, then I'm going to put the whole lot back onto the stove again and cook it out for about 4 minutes on pretty much medium to high heat. If you don't cook it out long enough, then the simple fact, it will not absorb the egg. If you just mix it up and then just take it off, you'll get less egg, you get less lift, you'll get less shape. Okay? I'm using butter. You can use margarine if you want, although margarine has more water in it. But I use salted butter, and lots of other people will say no, they will use unsalted butter.
Does it make much difference?
Not really, just to the flavour.
Okay.
Some people will use sugar in it. I'm not one for putting sugar in at all, but if you want sugar in there, you can also add flavours in there as well. But the problem is once you bake them off, the flavours don't tend to be baked fast, so they disappear during the baking.
Yeah.
You can make them into chocolate by adding cocoa powder into your flour. It's another thing to do, but I think we've got enough chocolate there so far. I don't think we're going to need any more. Just take it off the heat, safety reasons more than anything else. Take your sieved flour and then pour your sieved flour in. Make sure you've got a big enough pan to do this, otherwise it gets messy. And then just carefully and fairly quickly, don't take too long on doing this, otherwise the flour ends up in huge lumps. So you've got to get it in fairly quickly. Say off the heat, otherwise the flour starts to burn if it goes directly onto the heat. Also, you need to make a calculation of how many profiteroles you're going to need for this particular job. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute or two once I've got these in. See, there's a few lumps of flour there still lingering around, and I've really got to beat that in. It's good, you know, it's not an easy job. You've got to use a bit of strength. And then I'll put it back on the heat again, and then simply cook it out for about 4 minutes, stirring it around. A lot of people say when it leaves the sides of the pan, it's ready. Well, if you look at that, it's already leaving the sides of the pan, so I would just say set a timer, because 4 minutes doesn't seem like a long time when you set a timer, but counting out each second,
isn't it? Yeah.
You think, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Walk away from it. But it's not. So just set your timer. This is on 7 out of 9, so it's reasonably warm. You can see it's leaving the side of the pan very cleanly now. And just keep folding it over, so the whole lot has a chance to cook out. And you can see there it's pretty smooth now. There's no lumps of flour left in it. But at that stage you put the flour in and stir it in, do it off the heat and do it quite quickly.
The pan's almost clean around the edges.
Yeah, it's just the bottom it'll catch and burn. And again, that's the problem. You've got to stop that from happening, otherwise you end up with burnt bits going through it.
Yeah.
I was going to say about calculating the actual amount of profiteroles you need. I'm going to do more than I need, but the nice thing about it is, once you bake the profiteroles off anyway, if you don't use them, you simply stick them in a bag, put them in the freezer. And then
they'll always get used, won't they?
Yeah. People come round for dinner, you can do the old standby profiteroles and chocolate sauce, and a bit of cream in them. But the calculation, the simple calculation, is I just wrap a piece of paper around the bottom bit and then draw what size profiteroles I think are going to go around it.
Yeah.
So I've done that this morning, and that is approximately 12 to 13 that go around.
And then do reduce one for the height?
Reduce one for the height, and you've got to make each profiterole slightly smaller, each line slightly smaller, so you get to the top considerably smaller than the bottom ones. Otherwise it doesn't come up in a cone, it comes up in a tower.
So how many do you work out with this then? So
about 100, between 100 and 120 that you've got to do, believe it or not. But again, it depends on how much they rise in the oven.
Yeah.
You know, you might have to make one of those might take all of this, because I've got to sort out the decent profiteroles from the ones that are misshapen or blown or what have you. Right, that's it. Once we've actually got that cooked out, as you can see, it's smooth. Pop it into your machine bowl, or you can do it by hand. I don't recommend it with this amount, but you can do it by hand. Just turn the machine on a low speed, just to make sure that you take off that boiling hot heat from it. Maybe about a minute, just to keep it going round. Again, because once I start adding the eggs to it, if that's too hot when I put the eggs in, it's going to poach the eggs immediately, and you're going to get big lumps of egg into it.
So part of the reason is also to keep it, to cool it down by the
cool it down, yeah. Right. Depends on how warm it is on the day, depends on how Your machine takes away the heat. You've got a metal container. It'll take away the heat a lot better than a plastic container.
How do you know when it's the right temperature?
There's no way of telling, to be honest. If you can put your finger in it and stand the heat. No, that's still too hot. If you can put your finger in and stand the heat, then it's cool enough. If you put your finger in and it starts to hurt, it's too hot now. It's been mixing for about a minute on very low speed, and then I've taken the egg and I put in approximately about a tenth or 10% if you like. That then starts to curdle immediately, as I'm just going to show you. And if you add your egg too quickly, that's what you're going to end up with, a massive curdle. So you've got to add your egg very slowly at starting. And you've got to beat it through into a smooth paste before you add any more. On a machine it's also best to scrape it down as well during addition, because an awful lot of the roux stays at the bottom and doesn't get mixed into the actual egg. So that's come back to solid paste now. I'll show you that. That's come back to a paste, so I can now actually put more egg in. And you just keep doing that over a period of time.
So it goes kind of lumpy and then you just make it smooth again.
Separates, then comes back to an emulsion again. While that's mixing, I put the oven on. One of the things with choux pastry is that it gives off an awful lot of steam. You need a certain amount of steam in the oven to cook, but if you get too much, it blows. It gets very, very big. So what you've got to do, I've got to do in this oven anyway, I've got to slightly open that oven door to let all the steam out, or let a percentage of the steam out, so it bakes a little bit drier than normal. It's a really good oven, it really keeps hold of all its steam. Always add less egg than it tells you in the recipe. If you put too much egg in it, it becomes too runny and it flows flat. If you put too little egg in it, it stays too peaked, it's too stiff. You've got to do this by trial and error. It's getting to the point now where we're almost there, and we'll turn it up slightly. From the recipe that I normally use, I've actually got about 3 eggs less in this mixture, and it's looking as though I don't need any more egg in it. And the end result that you're looking for is that you get a peak. So if that's your dough, your paste, just flick it off there. There's lots of ways that you can use your finger, and you've got a peak there already, a steady peak. Turn it over and it slowly collapses. Slowly. If it collapses too quick, it's too runny. If it remains a peak, then it's too thick. So add more egg. If it's too runny, you've got to make some more roux to add to that to actually get it back to a good staging.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. A roux. So the next stage is to pipe it into the shape that are required. Profiteroles. You can pipe them any shape you like, really, eclair shapes. You can use a star tube. I'm using a plain tube, quite small. I'm using a Savoy bag, which is made of canvas and silicone. And you can use a paper bag, make a paper bag. You can use a throwaway bag, a plastic bag, anything you like. I like these simply because there's more firm grip to them. Take your paper, cut it to the size of your baking tray, put a little bit of choux pastry on.
Have you done any preparation on the trays, or are they just...
No, just clean.
Okay.
And then the choux pastry on the bottom just helps the paper to stick, because once you start piping these, they'll simply start lifting off with the paper if you haven't stuck it. Right, then you've got to say to yourself, well, how big do I need them? Personally, I today need them about that big. Not much bigger. Remember, they're going to pretty much double in size. Give them enough room between themselves to actually lift up. Now I know I need 13 for the bottom. So I need 13, pretty much of the same size. 2, 4, 6. Got 12 there, but I know at least half of them are going to blow. So I need to make double the amount.
And by blow you mean?
Expand too much, keel over, go looking like a cauliflower as it expands. It's like a Yorkshire pudding, you know, you put Yorkshire puddings into the oven, they're all from the same mixture, but they all come out looking different.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same with these.
Mine don't.
So I'm going to pretty much do twice as many as I need for the bottom. Depends on how many trays you've got to how many you can actually do. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 12, 24. I need 13. I should be able to pick them from that.
So these are just the bottom ones you do?
These are just the bottom ones.
Right, okay.
And then I bring it down slightly in size. And it's only a feel. But just to remind you what they are, if I've got 2, 4, 6 on each line, then I'll put 7 on this line because I know that's the next line up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just set them to one side. Depends on how many trays you've got, how many you can make at any given time. So, 1.
These are about the same size. Are these the smaller
These are
ones?
the next layer
the
up.
smaller ones, yeah.
So I'm still doing 7s on this. So if I've got 13 that are going to go around the bottom,
Yeah.
then I need 12 the next lot,
Yeah.
and then 11, 10, 9, take off. So
Yeah.
we get to the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These might seem really small, but they're going to double in size.
Okay. So this is row 2.
This is row 2. Right. Again, make twice as many as you need.
Okay.
Right, row 3, I'll put 8 in a line.
Yeah.
So I know, where am I when I do, because I've only got 2 trays.
Yeah, yeah.
When I come out the next time, I think, oh right, I've got row 3. I've done that. Oh, row 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. Good job, my mum told me to count. Squeeze. Okay, so that's pretty much that done, and then finally, which I'd recommend, but lots of people in this country don't do it, but I still recommend it, is take a pastry brush, fairly soft one, and just egg wash the top ever so lightly, and that pretty much does 2 things. It gets rid, well, it does 3 things really. It gets rid of the peak that you've probably piped, that little peak thing. It also helps to glaze them so they go brown, especially when you're doing things like sugar, when you're dipping in the sugar, because you can really see the colour of the profiterole. Chocolate, it doesn't really matter so much, because all you're going to see is chocolate anyway. Thirdly, it helps them from drying out, because as the paste dries out, it forms a hard shell, and inside, as it's baking, it creates a lot of steam. And the steam, to escape that hard shell, if it is hard and dry, will go to the very centre of it and escape through that. So literally, it blows the top like a volcano. And at that point, you've got a peaked top that you can't, it doesn't look good.
Okay, so a lot of this is all about the appearance of the profiteroles on there.
Yeah.
You see if they don't look nice.
Okay, so those are done. Those immediately can go into the oven. Put that away. pop them in, keep them separate, not too close. And what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of cardboard wherever I can find it. Tiny bit of cardboard just to keep that slightly open.
What temperature is the oven at, did you say?
200.
Okay.
200 for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes turn it down. This is a convection oven, so everything that you cook in a convection oven you've got to take down by 20 degrees. Bake it at 200 degrees for 10 minutes, stick a timer on, again it always helps. Then after 10 minutes turn it down to 20 degrees, less than that, so in other words 180. That's profiteroles, that's how you make them. I've got plenty of pastry left there. I'm on the third layer, so I've got loads and loads. I'll have loads extra. I don't care. I'll stick them in the freezer, bring them out, use them over a period of time. Somebody will eat them.
Can you freeze the mixture?
No. These profiteroles, I've left the door slightly ajar. They've been in the oven now for 10 minutes at 200 degrees. So what I'm simply going to do now is time it again for 15 minutes this time, and I'm going to turn it down to about 180, 170, thereabouts. I'm not going to open the door because I need the steam, slight amount of steam in there for them to rise. I don't need too much steam in there that they actually rise up and just explode, so you've got to reach a happy medium. If you can't open your oven door slightly ajar like I've got it, then simply about every 5 minutes just very quickly open it and close it again, so that the massive steam comes out and just leaves the residue in there. So in 15 minutes time I'll check them again. I'm quite happy because the first lot I did at that time, so I'm quite happy that those will do the same. These have been in now for 10 minutes at 200 with the door slightly ajar. They've then been in for another 15 minutes with the door slightly ajar, but I turned the oven temperature down to 170. Open the door. And what you're looking for, these are not quite ready. And the reason I know that is simply because if I take those out now, if I push that, I can see that it's kind of a bit squishy, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If I take those out now, within about 15 minutes of them cooling, that will simply collapse to that. In other words, there's too much moisture left in it. It needs to dry out. So although the other lot baked at that according to that time, this lot hasn't. It doesn't matter. You really don't care about that as long as you don't take them out too soon. So the way to make sure that they're fully baked is give them another 5 minutes at the same temperature you've got, making sure there's not too much steam in there. So don't take them out too soon, otherwise you'll end up with a squashy effort like that you can't fill and can't use, because it's pretty much still raw on the inside.
Right.
So I'll give them another 5 minutes and then I'll check them after that. So these have now been in for 10 minutes, 200 degrees. First 15 minutes for 170, 175. They weren't fully baked, so another 5 minutes I'm going to try them again. To say if they're too soft, I'll keep them in. So I'll give them another go. This time I'll have a look at the top one. I'll close the oven while I'm waiting, in case it's not ready. Now if I press that this time, there's no soft bits around it, so it's not collapsing as I push it in. So that's saying to me, the baked on the inside, it ain't going to collapse. That's good. So what I'll do now, I'll take those out, cool them down, and then choose the best ones for the job. The other ones will go in the freezer, and they'll come out when we have a party. Remember also that your bottom oven, anything in the bottom is going to cook slightly less than your top oven, than on top. So always be careful, don't take them out too soon. So those are they. So while I'm going to put those straight into a wire to get them cooled down fairly quickly. Okay, now what I need to do is choose the best ones. If I'm looking around, there are some that are slightly, there's one that's fallen over there that is okay, but it just doesn't look absolutely right. there's one there that's not particularly good, there's one there that's not particularly good, so I can put those to one side automatically and say, well, I don't want to use those because they don't look as good as they could do. And if I'm not happy with them, fine, once they get covered in chocolate sauce, you ain't going to see them, but it's the shape that's important. So I'm quite happy now that I've got an amount of profiteroles that are a nice shape and a nice size and a nice height to them. So I'm just going to pop them there and try and choose similar sized ones to go on the next stage. If I've got some small ones, I'll put them towards this end, because the small ones, obviously, as it goes to the top, I need to get them smaller and smaller and smaller. At the bottom they need to be reasonably large in comparison. So pretty much I'm almost there as far as profiteroles are concerned. Now I'm going to need 130. I'm really happy with those.
Yeah, they're very nice.
The pastry cream's cooled down sufficiently, and what I'm doing is just pushing it through a sieve, because I don't really want the orange zest left in there. All I want to do is from the flavour. But the other thing this does, twofold really, it gets rid of any lumps that might be in there, and also if I have to mix this with a spatula or something like that to mix it to become pliable enough to pipe, it starts to loosen off and become too sloppy. But pushing it through a sieve, you keep the firmness of the pastry cream without it becoming, without it disappearing into a complete watery mass. What I'm doing now, I'm going to start to fill them, but to fill them without bursting them open, I'm just making a small hole in the bottom of each one, trying to keep them in lines of the largest being at the bottom and the smallest being at the top. So I'm quite literally just popping a knife in there, twizzling it around, sharp end knife, twizzling it around to create that hole. So when I fill them, I'll fill them from the bottom. When they're filled, that will remain nice and smooth and even on the top, and the back will seal in the filling into there sort of thing, so that it can't spread out from this side. Okay, the next stage of this is actually filling the profiteroles with the pastry cream. I've put the pastry cream through the sieve to get rid of the lumps, to get rid of the orange zest that I didn't really want left in there. And now I've made a couple of bags. You can quite easily buy the disposable bags, and I haven't even put a nozzle in it. You don't need a nozzle, just simply don't fill it too full, otherwise the whole thing will collapse. And tighten it up, and then we've got an amount of pastry cream coming out. So the hole that we've made, just pop that into it and then pipe, and you'll feel it'll feel heavy. It'll just start to come out ever so slightly. Wipe its backside, as it were, and then put it in a line. So what I'm looking at is, once I'm filling these, I want them full. A lot of problems stem from the fact that people don't fill them enough. Now, if I just cut this one down so you can have a look at the amount of filling in this. The whole thing is completely filled with pastry cream, and that's what you're looking for. If it's only half full, A, it will collapse when I start to put chocolate on it, and B, the people aren't going to enjoy it as much because there's no filling in it. So again, just poke it in, press it until you think it's full enough or it starts to spurt out, wipe its backside, and off you go. And just continue to do that until you've done all of them. If you get to the point where it's overfilled and it starts to sprout out the sides, then you've got to make a choice whether you continue to use that or not. Personally, I wouldn't, because if you're dipping them in either boiling hot sugar or you're dipping them in chocolate, that pastry cream is going to drop back into the chocolate or the sugar, and it's going to ruin the base that you're working with. See, that's what you don't want, loads of gunge on the outside. Make sure it's it's cleaned off within reason. And if the bag starts to open up on you, fine, start another bag.